Okay, great. Thanks for coming to my talk. It's going to be building an open source community one friend at a time. So we're in the community dev room here, but I've been to a couple talks. No one has actually really defined what exactly community is. So maybe I'll start there. Here's photos of a couple different communities that I'm a part of. And as you can see from this, there are many different types of communities. There's open source communities, there's my biking community, there's my friends, there's my running club, and there's also my party friends. And these communities all have different strengths, and one way to look at that would be how often do I see these people? For instance, I see my bike friends usually on vacation. Open source people is kind of ad hoc. My friends is daily, my running club is weekly. You know, all these kind of have their own rhythm and tempo to them. And the other thing about these communities is they're not kind of like independent, separate groups. A lot of these are overlapping, right? So someone that I bike with is someone I party with. Someone that I see every day is also someone that goes to my running club, right? Community isn't this kind of one thing. It's this amorphous group of people. And really, what I think community is it's built on these one-to-one connections between peoples. So this is, kind of a microservices diagram. You can think about all these different microservices talking to each other, and these connections are kind of what holds the whole network together. And I would say it's the same thing about community. You have all these different, nodes, all overlapping, different strength, communicating to each other in different ways. And I would really say our community is built on these one-to-one friendships. So the question I'm trying to answer today is, how can we build and strengthen these friendships to create better communities? And at this point, you might be asking, why is this guy standing in front of the room? So a little bit about me. I'm from a large Irish Catholic family. All of our family gatherings were a lot of people around all the time. And I think that's really where I started to get some of my community from. And in college, the first thing I did was join the student union. And one of the things that they had was, kind of a saying. And it's in Latin, obviously, because it's an old-fashioned society. But what it is, roughly translated, has really stuck with me. Light increases through human interaction. And I think that drives a lot of what I do today. So, with that, let's actually step out of the software world for a second. I know we're here at FOSDEM, but if you take nothing else away from this talk, I want you to understand that there's a lot of communities in this world, and we can learn a lot from the ones outside of open source. So, what other community am I a part of? I'm a part of Midnight Runners. That's why I'm wearing this t-shirt today. And what exactly is Midnight Runners? Well, we run together, we work out together, and we socialize together. And really, this is the ethos that we have together of fitness plus social. That's what Midnight Runners is. And what we're trying to do is dismantle the idea that fitness needs to be hard and unenjoyable by combining this social aspect into it. And this idea has really resonated with a lot of people. Midnight Runners is now a global community with 17 cities around the world. And not only kind of big scale, but bring this all the way back down to me, Midnight Runners as a community has given me a lot too. It's given me fitness, it's given me a place I call home, it's given me my relationship, and it's also given me friends in Berlin and all around the world. So how do we go about building community at Midnight Runners? I think the first thing that a lot of communities need to think about is, what is your wow factor? For Midnight Runners, it's this fitness plus social. I remember the first time I went to a Midnight Runners run, I was a little bit lost in Berlin, as a lot of people in Berlin are. I was struggling about what to do next. I was thinking about moving back to moving back to the US. And I went to this Wednesday run, and I was like, this is it. This is so amazing that the next week I changed my flight so I could come back early just to go again. Right? So when somebody comes into your community, what is that wow factor that they're going to say, this is so amazing, I want to come back? Right? And as we're saying, community is all about the people. And so in Midnight Runners, we have the captains, which we think of as the pillars of the community. Right? This wow factor starts with the captains, because that's the initial reason that people are going to come back to Midnight Runners, that first experience, that first interaction. Because at the end of the day, it's about the people, not the workout. And in any community, it's always about the X. It's about the people, not whatever else you're doing. Right? And so how do we as captains kind of create this experience? We welcome people, we meet new members, we introduce people to each other, making sure that we join those different nodes in the network together. During the run, we tell people how it works, they understand what to do. We engage in the experience that we're part of the participants too. And we really do create that MR wow, so that people are like, this is something new, this is something different, this is something I need in my life. And then afterwards, we encourage people to join us for socially afterwards, and try to remember people every single week. Right? And there's lots of different types of captains and Midnight Runners. There's the social butterfly, who likes to talk to everyone. There's the Care Bear, who's trying to be representative and taking care of our community. There's the party animal, bringing that energy, excitement, that engagement to the community. There's the creative magician, who's sparking joy and making magical moments that people want to come back for. Right? And after the people, how else do we do it? Well, we do these things called party runs, and these are really creating memorable moments for people in our community. And that's our boot camp run that ends up with a party afterwards. And it's themed to increase the sense of community. People are like, I'm part of something. Right? And kind of taken all together, what Midnight Runners does is it gives people a purpose of fitness plus friends. And that's why people come back every single week to 17 cities around the globe. So that's kind of the step out of open source. Let's step back in. How does all of what I've said so far translate into the open source world? Well, the other thing you should know about me is I work for Isovalent. They're the creators of Cilium and eBPF. And I'm going to be talking about my experience in both of those communities, building and growing each of them. And if you're not familiar with us, our kind of ethos is that eBPF is the future of infrastructure, and it's how things are going to be built for the cloud-native world and beyond. And if you're not familiar with the Cilium project, it's actually one of the fastest-moving projects in the Linux Foundation ecosystem. You can see it on the graph here behind Linux and Kubernetes. And if you also aren't familiar with Cilium, it's really become the cloud-native networking standard. There's now certifications around it. Cilium is a CNCF graduated project. People are hiring others with Cilium experience, and my company actually just got recently acquired by Cisco, right? And so that's where Cilium comes from and what we've created. But how do we actually get there, and how do we create the open source community around the project? The first thing I'm talking about is the wow effect, right? What is the wow effect for us? And for us, that's eBPF. Now, I don't believe in 10x software engineers, and maybe you don't either, but eBPF really is a 10x software. It can help you do things like networking, observability, security, tracing 10x better than previous generations of technologies. These examples, graphs, are from different blog posts that people have created in the community. And when people come in, they say, wow, eBPF really is a different way of building, creating, running, maintaining software. And that's the wow effect people come for, right? And now somebody's interested. They're like, I want to know more about eBPF. I want to know more about Cilium. So they're coming into your community. What do? The first thing you do is say hello. A simple way to do this is if you have a Slack channel, set up a greet bot. You can say, hey, welcome, X. We're happy to have you in our community here, right? This is quite simple to set up and is an automated way to welcome people into your community. Next thing is document resources to get people started. You say, these are the jumping off points. Somebody wants to have a path, a couple stepping stones. They know what the next steps. For Midnight Runners, that was, I'm going to come back next Wednesday and do this again. If you're starting in the Cilium ecosystem, it's, hey, check out the website, check out the docs. These are good places to kind of learn about the community and get started. Then, I think this is also nice, give them a point of contact. I actually put my contact info, and I say, hey, if you have any questions, message me on Slack, right? So people feel like, there's someone that they can talk to, and they're not alone in this community, right? Bringing them into the network. The next thing, if you saw Paris's talk, is give them someone to look up to, right? We say there's contributors and there's committers and maintainers of the project. Let them know that there's a ladder, there's a way for them to get involved, right? It's great for them to know that. And also give them somewhere to look up to. Give them different roles that they can grow into and grow towards. I think there's been a lot of talk in this room so far today about giving people like job titles, giving people something they can bring back to their work, something they can bring back to themselves, being say, hey, I'm a part of this, this is what I'm doing for this community. And so in Cilium, we have a couple different roles laid out in our governance docs. When somebody's into your community and wants to become a part of it, make sure you engage with them. People want to have that one-to-one connection, right? This friendship, if you want to do marketing, that's great, it's one-to-many. If you want to do community, that's great, it's one-to-one. So engage with people one-on-one. Say, hey, thank you. I really appreciate the work you're doing and that you're part of this with us. Beyond that one-to-one interaction, you should also recognize the work that people are doing. So what I do every week is I go around the community and see what people have done and do a newsletter. It's being like, hey, look at the great content that people have been creating and call them out by name. Once you kind of do that, you start to realize that we really have not just our own community. It's what I was saying before. There's all these overlapping communities. If you're in the CNCF ecosystem, you'll recognize the landscape. Some people would say overcrowded or a hellscape, but I think what is really great about this is that it shows that there's so many overlapping communities that we can take advantage of, partner with, and learn and grow from each other. And people aren't a part of a single community, and you can bring people into yours. Another way that we do that is we're having a Cilium eBPF day at KubeCon, right? So going off this back and the strength of the Kubernetes ecosystem to help grow our own community. And in fact, if you think about it, that's exactly what we're doing here at FOSDEM. All the different dev rooms, right, those are all overlapping communities. And probably each person here goes into a different set of them and goes to a different set of talks. And I think that's great because you're creating the experience exactly that you want. And we're all building our communities together. The next thing is to spark joy in the community. Do something that's unique, that's something memorable. So one of our community members created a Cilium cake. Swag is another common way in open source to do that. We also created trading cards about two of our maintainers as a fun thing to do. And beyond these little things, also create really memorable moments for your community. So for example, we created an eBPF documentary. We created the Illustrated Children's Guide to eBPF, and I have some copies here if you want to see what that looks like afterwards. And we also created a Lego set for Cilium, so that people would be like, hey, remember when we had the documentary, we had the children's book, here's my Lego. That's what people are going to look back at, these memorable moments, and you want to give that to them. Because what all of this does is it gives people an identity that allows them to say, hey, I'm a part of this with these other people. Because at the end of the day, what people really want to have is something that gives them connections, something that gives them a purpose. And these friendships are really the building blocks that keep our communities running. Thank you for coming to my talk.
Anyone got questions?
Thanks. You can also, I can say it if you want to.
Hey, thank you for your talk. I really liked the tips for getting the people engaged in community. I have one question regarding welcoming newcomers, because you showed us your greetbot into your Slack, which was kind of like a long block of text full of links. I'd like to know if you measure some kind of click-through rate into that. And also, then you followed with one-to-one interactions. But all of those on your slides were connected to some contributions. So I would like to know if there is something in between, between the greetbot and then the one-to-one interactions. If we have some, maybe buddies or something like that. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So do we have something between the greetbot and getting people further? We don't currently. I think that's something I'd like to work on. Kind of step one, and then how do we get to step two? And I think people kind of have to find their own way in the community right now. And then once they get to step three, they wrote a blog post. Then I start to get to know them more. I think this is also like a really difficult thing in open source too, because it's also a lot of people, do like a drive-by contribution, and how do you know? And you never know which ones are going to stay around and which ones aren't. And like, unfortunately, you can't invest everything into every single contributor, and so this may be extremely controversial, but like maybe that's like a good weeding process, is like if they can find themselves to step 3, if you don't always give them step 2. I don't know. Like, it's always great to have more contributors, but yeah, so that's my controversial opinion for today. Say what you will.
So I have a question. I find myself as much of an introvert person, so I don't like fitness meetings and big parties. So if you have any advice for people like that to build communities of like-minded people, or even open to other people?
Yeah, I would say it's all the same advice. If you actually look at the structure of my deck afterwards, you can see the same structure in Midnight Runners applies to the same structure in the open source community. I was just doing the Midnight Runners example because that's the one I'm most familiar with. And I really do think, like, when you're trying to create a community, that wow effect is like, okay, what is this community trying to bring people around? That may be eBPF, it may be running, it may be like we really like playing pool, we really like, I don't know, going to quiz night, right? And like give people a reason, like why. People want a purpose in their life, and see if you can give that to them, right? That's why the community initially forms, and you kind of create those next things to build the community around that. But you need to kind of have that core purpose that people are going to come to, and I think that's the most important thing. And it can be about anything, it doesn't have to be about fitness.
Hi, Bill. Sorry, I didn't mean for it to sound that way. I was going to ask you a funny question of why don't we go out for lunch more, but I actually do have a legitimate question for you about your talk. So one of the things that you said that isovalent and Cilium do to sort of help create that wow factor is like merch, because then it's a sort of physical reminder and a memory that people create. By the way, everyone, Cilium has great merch, and eBPF has fantastic merch, and you should absolutely find them after. So my question for you is, in our trying economic times of tightening budgets on everything, how do you justify the cost internally?
You get acquired? No, sorry, that's not the right answer. I think there's also like lots of ways to do like stuff that isn't like physical merch and doesn't have to cost money. Like actually, like one of my favorite things is that a lot of people actually like is like the EB decks. And so we have this repo of all these different bees. We wrote backstories about each of them. Like this is something that people really like, and it cost the cost of a GitHub repo, which is free. And I know a lot of people like to use these on slides. I think probably the favorite one my personal favorite one is Excel BPF here. There's a great April Fool's article that we wrote last year. I mean, this is another memorable moment, right? Like we wrote, now launching Excel BPF, right? And it didn't cost any money to write the blog post. I mean, a bit of time, but that's not something you have to put in a budget line by line item somewhere. And so I think there's lots of ways to do it without creating physical stuff too. Yeah.
We've got time for one more question. Oh. I'm doing my midnight runners. Maybe.
Every Wednesday at 7:30.
Hi, thank you for the talk. So you mentioned about the wow factor, about creating that wow factor. But say now you already have a wow factor. How do you market yourself that, okay, we are out there? How do you make people aware of your community and they can come and join your community? Is there any some tricks or some things that we can do to grow the community?
I would say, if you want to form a community and you've decided, here's our wow factor, here's our purpose, whatever, know that there's, a million other communities out there. And I think probably the most important thing when you're starting it is, don't think about your